To boldly go, those words lit a fire in a young Adam Kolozetti's heart, and he never let go of them. He chased the dream of space flight, earned his wings as a pilot, and built his career solving complex problems in some of the most demanding industries on Earth: defense, oil and gas, and construction. But somewhere between the skies and the systems, Adam discovered something deeper: that the real mission isn't about technology or titles. It's about clarity, collaboration, and calling. In this episode of the Men's Room Show, we will sit with Adam to explore the raw, untold side of masculine leadership, where purpose meets process, where brotherhood beats bravado, and where the man that you become is the launchpad for the man you're meant to be. We'll talk spaceships and systems, ego and execution, clarity and momentum, and why Adam believes that when a man is clear on his purpose, there's nothing more powerful. So buckle in. This conversation is about taking off on the inside, because this episode isn't just about Adam's journey, it's about yours. Adam, we are ready for takeoff.
Thank you so much, Linda. This is really exciting. Thank you for having me. Yeah, we're here to talk a little bit about, that young child staring at the TV screen, wondering what it would be like to explore the universe and outer space and, just that sense of wonder, and how that has taken me through my life and ended up in a more of an internal exploration, the inner reaches of the mind, so to speak, and how that has translated into success for me and the challenges I've had. So, buckle up, I guess.
Yes, definitely. And, I thought we'd start off with one of the first questions really being about how you always wanted to be Captain Kirk. And what did that hero, that archetype, represent to you as a young boy? And how has that shaped the man you've become today? And this question is important because we want to explore that little boy in you, how he traveled and became that man that you are today.
Well, as we know, I was a lover of science fiction, fantasy, Star Trek in particular. And I remember when I was maybe 12, starting to grow up a little bit and getting a little bit worried because I was like, they haven't really invented space travel yet. I'm gonna run out of time here if I want to captain a starship. Um, and then as I grew, later in life and reflecting on this, this archetype, this Captain Kirk, this like fearless, um, suave hero that's, kind of a rebel and carves his own path, so to speak. I realized that it was really my dad. My dad was my hero, and I had just like translated it into this, made up hero that I was watching in TV. But really, my dad was that person to me, right? This unshakable, invincible, no one tells him what to do. He changes the world type archetype, right? Um, so yeah, that's kind of been a bit of my guiding star, I think, as I grew up and went through school, and then I got my engineering degree, and not maybe surprisingly, my dad was an engineer as well. Um, so I came from a family where the academic expectations were very high, and that seemed pretty natural. And where I live in Calgary, up in Canada, it's an oil and gas hub. So, I feel like every place has a script, where you're expected to follow this path, and this is what success looks like here. Like if you're in Silicon Valley, it's like you're gonna start an app and sell it for millions. And if you're in Calgary, you get your degree, you maybe travel for the summer, and then you start working for one of the big energy companies, and that's you climb the corporate ladder. Like that's the script. Um, but I never liked that script. I did an internship. I was like, I kind of dabbled, and I was like, no, you know what? I still love space travel. I'm still kind of crazy. I know I don't know where this is going, but I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to get my aerospace engineering degree. So that's what I did. And my parents, to their credit, were like, okay, hey, if this is what you want, like, we'll support you. Like, let's do it. Um, so that's what I did. I went back to school. I got a master's degree in aerospace engineering. And, along the way, I had in the back of my mind that I wanted to be an astronaut. Even as I got older, I was like, that's the dream. That's what I would absolutely love to do more than anything in the world. I understand that it's near impossible. Um, but, I was 19, I was in university, and I was like, just in case, I read that if you're a pilot, you have a better chance. I'm going to get my pilot's license. That's what I did. I started flying planes. Um, and I remember it just so happened that my flight test, which is really intense, landed in the same week as my final exams. So I just remember this like this is a lot for I was 19 years old, final exams, I was probably like second year university, so it's still in that like weeding out phase. That's what I wanted to do. So I did it. And I ended up getting a job in the defense industry back here in Calgary. And I kind of accomplished what I set out to do. I wanted to work on cool stuff, but that's what it meant to me. And I got to do that. And I think the evolution for me is after working for a few years, I started to realize that it's not so important what you're doing. It doesn't matter if you're designing I don't know, like a pipeline or a t-shirt or a golf club or whatever, or it's really the same. It just matters who you're doing it with. And if those people are enriching your life, and that is really what matters. Um, so I think that was maybe a first sort of evolution for me that like doesn't matter what you're doing, it's who you're doing it with. And I ended up in the oil and gas industry eventually, and then in construction, like doing high-rise construction. So I kind of bounced around in industries, but in doing so, I got a lot of exposure to different ways of thinking, different ways of doing things. For example, in defense, it's very, very process intensive, right? An airplane can't fall out of the sky, right? Um, and then you get to like oil and gas, and it's a little more cavalier. They don't have to have those restrictions, right? It's not life or death. Of course, nobody wants a pipeline to leak, but people aren't dying instantly if you get it wrong, right? So I had a lot more exposure to this idea of like process and how people work together, and I really took an interest in human behavior. And what I witnessed was that when things were really good, things were great. But the second there was like trouble, and at that time in 2015, there was layoffs happening in Calgary. What happened was people started to get disengaged because they were worried about their job, and there was no trust like with leadership to begin with because they hadn't bothered because they didn't need to because things were good, and like quality issues went up, and people were worried about like clients were upset, and like the whole like integrity of the entire company started to crumble really quickly. So my business partner and now Caitlin and I were like, why is that? Why is that when you start a company, like you and I are going to start a company tomorrow, right? We have this idea, we're going to change the world. We have so much energy and creativity, like there's no problem too small, we're going to solve it. And that is a really powerful thing, right? They say nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come, right? And then you're successful and maybe you grow to like, now there's five of you in your garage working and then there's 10 and we're all so excited. Like this is going to be great. And we're changing the world. And then somewhere along the way, we grow and we get to like 50 people, 100 people or whatever. And then what happens? We start to look a little bit like everybody else. We start to have people quitting because they don't like their boss. We have quiet quitting happening because someone's disengaged. We have HR issues. We have, the high intensity of performance that we had begins to fade. Or it's like becomes intermittent and unpredictable. So that's what I started a company called ENTA Solutions, and it was this idea that how can we keep this level of psychological engagement super high as you scale? So that's kind of where we started. Um, and uh, I think the reason why people and this idea of like organizational culture was so interesting to me because I really loved this idea of how people think and how people behave. Why are people so chaotic? Why are they crazy sometimes? You know, how could I influence a group of people to behave a certain way or towards a certain goal or um, whatever? So that was, I think, my first inkling that like my passion or my calling or whatever was something around like human psychology or people or behavior. So then
I
on
love how you've unpacked that. Um, because you're right. Things begin with an idea. People form around an idea, they get the passion, they find out where the strengths lie, they band together and they start creating until, like you said, that moment comes where everyone's like, well, hmm, why am I here? This is a problem. This isn't what I signed up for.
right?
Those are real challenges in business, in entrepreneurship, in any organization where uh, getting like real clear on what the goal is. And you said it best. Who we surround ourselves with matters. Culture matters. The support matters. And so, I see, you know, a lot of times things go south in an organization is because they neglect to take a stance on how do we align the people and all the behaviors and the makeup of who you have on your team at any given moment because teams members change, and it's like, well, how do you keep the team intact when you've got constant change, people coming and going, and sometimes what can happen is the goal or the vision or the endpoint that everyone's going to gets blurry, and so it's about how do you rally the people or what's needed to make the behavior changes to get back on track. And so I'd be curious to hear how you have seen the chaos that can happen when things are out of sorts, and how you, as a leader, got people back on track.
Well, I think, you know, the simplest way I think to put it that I've learned is that people just want to be seen and they want to be heard. That's all. For some people, that's more public. For some, that's more private, you know, and every kind of range in between. But when we talk about change, for example, you know, a great example is like, I don't know, any business trying to implement a new software. That's a great one, right?
Absolutely.
Um, right? It ends up being kind of a pain in the butt. It's a disaster. It takes three times as long. It's always over budget. No one likes it. Everyone complains about it. But then if you kind of delve a little further, like, did anybody ask you? Well, no. Did anybody, you know, tell you where to provide feedback? Well, what do you mean? Like, is there a suggestion box? Right? Is there somewhere you can say, like, I don't like that when I click this, and then I have to do that. Like, this isn't really working. Who do you tell? And they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Right? So people don't feel seen, they don't feel heard. Like one time Caitlin and I ran this workshop around change, and the team was up in arms. They had a new leader. People weren't jiving. They were trying to implement a new process. It was a big disaster. And before we got there, the leader took us aside and said, "Hey, look, Sally. One of the big reasons we're here is we can't get her to do anything new. Like she's just such a stick in the mud. We don't know what to do with her. We're stuck." So we start talking. We go through this workshop, and we start talking about like things like burnout and things of like, you know, feelings, very arm wavy stuff for a bunch of technical people, right? This is out of their comfort zone. And what we start talking about is like capacity and like, what do you do when you are so like full that you don't have room to like think or do anything new. And Sally's like, "Oh my God, that's exactly how I feel." And they're like, "What?" She's like, she was such a meticulous person. That's what made her so good at her job. But she barely went to the bathroom all day. Like just to keep up with her current job, she had to focus so intensely and was so exhausted that it didn't matter what the new thing was, didn't matter that it would make her life easier. She didn't have the capacity to even think about it. And so the team was like shocked and they're, oh, well, we can help you this way. We can do this for you. What if I do? Like, and in 2 seconds, they had removed that burden from her. And, now she's the biggest champion. As simple as that, right? Just someone had to ask her. That's it.
Yes, sometimes people forget to ask the people that are in charge of leading the change at that level what they need. And so yes, and being seen and being heard and knowing, like you said, where to go to offer those suggestions. What would you say when you have organizations where they say that you can offer suggestions and then you give the suggestions and then nothing you don't get affirmation that great, that's thank you for bringing that forward, and you just kind of get the but we can't do that.
Mhm.
uh
Well, we like to say, it's not the wall's job to hold the values up, right? You have to walk the walk and talk the talk. And this is the same. This is a very familiar story, right? You fill out the survey, you provide the feedback, and then nothing. So then next
mhm.
year, when the same survey comes out, this time you're like, like you're not quite as into it. And then by the third year, you're like, whatever, right? So.
Yes,
It's a perfect opportunity to build trust, but if you're going to ask, you better be ready to deliver and deliver timely. And it doesn't mean like big things, but like small things, right? We call them quick wins. You want to show people that you care. So if someone's like, the coffee sucks, fix the coffee, right? If the dishwasher is a problem, dishwasher is always a problem in offices, right? Fix that. Come up with a process. Or if you're the leader, do the damn dishes. Show everybody that you're going to do it. Guess what? And everyone else will start doing it, right? Like, um, I think that is the tricky part is people aren't prepared. They don't have a system in place, like a feedback system. They're not ready to act on the quick, easy things that one person could do in an afternoon that might make a difference, right? The bigger stuff, yeah, it might take a year or a lot of money, or we got to get budget or whatever. We can't do it now. The answer could be no. No, we can't do that idea, but here's why. Oh, wow. Somebody took the time to come down here and like talk to me about my idea. Well, I got another one. Amazing. Tell me about that one, right? Like people are an idea farm and it's neglected and it's so easy to access that. I think people just want to feel a part of something bigger than themselves. And if they feel heard, they feel seen, they'll stay. Someone across the street offers them $10 an hour, they're gonna be like, no, man, here I feel like I'm contributing. Why would I leave? Right?
absolutely.
Um,
I can't agree more with that outlook. Yeah. And those are such easy things to do. But a lot of times, like you said, it's other circumstances that might prevent someone that would normally do that, like experiencing burnout or not having any capacity that might drive that. So you have to have, you know, empathy for people in those roles, and then maybe, have the courage to and bravery to go say, what do you need? How can we help? And in a way that they'll accept it from you. And that in itself, I wish more people would do that.
well, I think this is why leadership, entrepreneurship, right? The pressure becomes very great when you get into these roles. Um, Especially, if you take entrepreneurship, for example, the frequency of bad things that happen to you is so high. How can you handle that and still be energized and still be a leader and show up and have the capacity to be that empathetic to take a moment to recognize that you just need a second to talk, right? Like, how do I create that space? This is why it's a spiritual journey, because if you're not able to flow that through you, if you're got your energy is stuck, how are you going to show up in anything but a stress case? And then that translates to your team and so on and so forth, right? I'll tell you like my quick story. So when I was 12, I was playing soccer and team sports and hockey, and I was getting a little bit of trouble because I was very anxious when I played, and I'd get into fights. And I'm like a very quiet, calm person, so this is very out of character. And my parents were a little bit worried. So, stroke of genius, they put me in martial arts, specifically Muay Thai, because a lady that worked with my dad had a brother that did it, and this ended up being very impactful for me. And the gym was very much that cliche, like Rocky Balboa gym, right? It's like down these creaky stairs into a basement. And as you go down, you hear like the creak of like chains moving and the smell of sweat and the bang of leather. And, it was just this very intimidating, but at the same time, intoxicating environment. So, I'm 12 years old. I go down there and I fell in love with this space and this idea. Um, so martial arts became kind of my way of processing these intense emotions that I was having as I was getting older and going through teenagers years. And um, that was like this is like 31 years ago now, and I'm still still doing it. And I think it took me, 5 years to get a black belt, but another like 15 to realize this whole time I wasn't learning how to punch or kick. I was learning how to connect my mind and my body. I was learning how to be calm when something upset me, right? I was learning to be able to deal with that fight or flight and translate it into something else. And um, that kind of evolved into I was, working next to a YMCA, and they had some Tai Chi classes. I was like, oh, I'll try Tai Chi. That sounds really cool. I've been doing martial arts, but this sounds really interesting. So I got into that. And then someone just before the pandemic, I was curious about meditation and I met someone that did meditation. So I was like, hey, cool. Like, why don't you teach me a little bit about this? So now I'm starting to play in like the mind. And what's happening in my regular life is my capacity for these things that you talk about is starting to increase. My empathy is increasing. I'm starting to process this stuff a little better. Luckily, because March of 2020, I was training at the gym and there was this bang, like I stepped and my Achilles tendon like blew. And if you've ever heard one of those, it's a very violent, um, terrible sound when that happens. It feels like I thought a bag, like a heavy bag, had fallen on me. So, um, not great, but okay, fine. I'm in a cast. They put you in a cast with your toe pointed, and then it heals back together. And but that's like 3 months in a cast, and then you got to do physio. This is right. So that happens. That's on a Wednesday. The following Monday, the lockdowns are declared, and now we're in a pandemic. 2 days after that, all of our contracts were essentially canceled, for our business, small business. So yeah, in the course of a week, I'm now in crutches. I'm stuck at home, and my business is dead. Just like that. Like life came and it came big.
So you're physically and literally and maybe energetically stuck. And what I'm getting from you here is by that act of you at 12 entering into martial arts that opened the doors to all these different somatic activities. So you mentioned martial arts, Tai Chi, meditation, and all of these things I believe, and I don't know if you'll agree with me, but all of those somatics are what leaders need in order to get inside and in touch with their outside world of things that they're feeling so they can go inward. And so when these crises happen, as you described, they have a way to take that knowing and be able to be resilient and get through those things and become unstuck.
Yeah, I think, and whatever it is to you, right? For me, it was martial arts. It was very like movement and it was like athletics based. But for some people, maybe it's painting, like art is a great example, right? Very cathartic, this creative process. And, um, my story kind of delves into that as well. But whatever it is for you, that self-work becomes important for these reasons as we described, because life comes for you sometimes, you know? Um, you know, uh, what I just described sounds terrible, but some perspective, there are much worse things that could happen to myself or somebody I loved than this. Even though in my relative experience, this is pretty awful, right? Um, so, okay, my leg heals. And what I didn't mention is that about 10 years earlier, in all my training, all of a sudden my hips stopped working. Like all of a sudden I couldn't walk. And my, of course, I went to a doctor and got x-rays and all this kind of stuff. And it turns out I had impingements in both hips, which is a deformity on the femur. It's kind of like if your femur had like sharp knives on it and it just carves out all the cartilage. So what should have taken 70 years took 30, right? So I had the hips of like an 80-year-old and I could barely walk. And the went to see a surgeon and they're like, "Oh yeah, you need new hips, but you're only 30. We don't really want to give you that's too young. Do you want to try putting it off at least for a few years?" So I was like, okay, but I didn't really know what to do. But then I met a guy just randomly through some physio that I was doing. He was a specialist in movement. There wasn't even a certification for it. And he's like, you don't need surgery. He's like, it's going to be so much work. He's like, but if you're up for it, I don't think you need surgery. And I was like, hey man, like I'm crazy, you seem crazy. Like let's do it. So he made me a program. It was 3 times a week, 45 minutes. And to start with, I was doing weird things like just like rolling over on the ground. Just to like, he's like, I not only need to get your muscles moving again, but I need your brain to, because your brain is now treating your hips like trauma. So it's frozen everything around it. It's not letting them move. And then as a result, it's putting strain on other parts of your body that are having to take this imbalance. So it's like I not only have to get your muscles moving, I have to teach your brain to just chill out. So is all this like standing on one leg on Bosu balls with weights and like it built and built and built and built. But one of the things I learned from this is it is way harder to not train than to train. So what I mean by that is I was doing all this physio in my gym where all my friends were kicking and punching and doing all the things I loved, and I was in the weight room in the back just like rolling and doing like these exercises. But then, after like 4 or 5 months, I actually felt pretty good. I was like, I could go train, I could push through the pain, I'd be fine. But it was the discipline to not do that, to keep going, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And it took about 18 months. And after 18 months, I was back to like 90%. So you think about that, I have no cartilage in my hips, either one. It's bone on bone. As far as the surgeon's concerned, I shouldn't be able to sleep, never mind walk, never mind train. And here I'm at 90% because I trained my brain with the help of this expert to keep everything balanced and moving and kind of strengthen what needed to be strengthened. And surgeon couldn't believe it. He filled out a lifestyle score. I got like 86%. And he's like, he called his student in. I was in their office and he calls his student and he's like, look at these x-rays. What would you say? And the student's like, oh man, this guy needs new hips. They're like, well, look at the lifestyle score. And he's like, that's impossible. And um, but it wasn't. It was just work. It was a lot of work. It's a lot of slow. It's kind of like I just had to have faith because there was no
Yes.
immediate gratification whatsoever, right? If anything, you'd feel a little better and then you feel a little worse and you feel a little better. And even after it got better, I still have to do that stuff 3 times a week because I was walking that fine of a thread, you know? Um, but what that
Well,
taught me is that um, nothing's kind of impossible. you the the spectrum of what you can do or cannot do is way bigger than you think. Um, so this was kind of the lead up to the Achilles tendon. I actually managed to put off surgery for 8 years. I tried to make it 10. I put it off for 8 years. Then eventually, so in January of 2020, I called the surgeon. I was like, okay, put me on the list, because it's like a year wait, right? Put me on the list. Take the hip out. I'm like, okay. So now March happens.
Mm-hmm.
Achilles gets teared. The pandemic is in full force. Business is tanking. What am I going to do? So on the business side, Keith and I learned everything we could about like social media and video. And we actually used that stuff to like save the business so that it started to look good. I got out of my cast after 3 months. I'm feeling like, oh man, I'm walking again. And then what happens? Like ring, 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 ring. Like who's on the phone? Hey, good news. We have your surgery date. It's next month. So I'm like, oh, amazing. So now this is October. I get my hip taken out. So now I'm back in crutches. Another 3 months of just kind of recovering from that. So I'm feeling pretty good. This is now into like March of 2021, but the gyms are all locked down still. Like it's the second year of the pandemic. People are neighbors telling on neighbors and like, it's just this terrible time. And I'm like, perfect. I'm going to train harder than ever. I'm going to get in the best shape of my life because when the gym's open, I'm back. I'm so hungry and I'm so excited to like, do the things that I love again. So July, boom, the gym's open. I go back, third day back. I'm training. What happens? My left leg, Achilles tendon, bam, snaps. So down I go. And I think the first one, I really vividly remember that the pain in the leg. Um, but the second one, the other side, when I ever think about it, I feel the pain like in my chest. And I think it's because it broke my heart more than it broke my leg, you know? Um, and I could take the first injury, I could take the surgery. I'm, very resilient. I think as a result of years of chronic pain. Um, but the third one like broke me.
Mm-hmm.
Like emotionally, I was devastated. Yes, I went back in the cast and eventually recovered. But like a year later, I was like kind of depressed. Like I was very not myself. I had put on weight. Like I was kind of just stuck. And I think the tricky part about that, if I recall, is that I didn't know. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't even tell that I was in that much of a funk. Other people
Mm-hmm.
around me could and tried to like, hey, like, are you okay? Whatever. But I was just like, yeah, I'm fine. What are you talking about? Like, I couldn't see how broken I was. And then thankfully one day I just snapped out of it about a year later. But I think what that taught me, like looking back, is if you're a resilient person, then you know, growth comes from pain, right? I needed to learn some things. I needed to grow as a person, but I need to be broken to do that. So like what injury number one, not enough. I just dealt with it. Injury number two, still not enough. So fine, here's number three. It took three cascading events in a short period of time to completely shatter me and I had to put myself back together. Lucky for me, I had been practicing meditation for a few years, and that's honestly what like got me through it from going crazy. Because I think it was this idea of power, right? I put off surgery for 8 years. I felt powerful. I felt like I don't care what the universe says. I don't care what doctors tell me. I can do whatever I want. I'm invincible. Or maybe not invincible, but like I am capable of incredible things. But this was like, universe is like, I don't care. We're taking everything from you, and the universe doesn't care. You have no power here. So I think that's what broke me, that like the universe came and took all my power away in a second, and my belief that I had control over my life or or anything. And that was devastating. Right?
So, how did you get your faith back when you went from being broken, losing the power, not feeling like you had control, to a place to not knowing what was going to come next? How do you get that belief back when you've been down that path, and what you described was a difficult one, because it was more than just the physical. It was the mental game of, oh, I don't have control over my how my body performs. I don't have control over what's going on in the future. How am I going to get there? I mean, how do you get back to belief? Because that's the kicker there, I think, is lack of belief keeps us stuck.
Mm. Yeah, 100%. And I think sometimes the natural reaction is to grind it out elsewhere. And you're like, just work harder on your business, right? But meantime, your physical health might suffer, or your relationships might suffer, or whatever, right? Because you're not capable of that type of connection, right? Your empathy like drops considerably. Your leadership will go down. Like you're not capable of standing at your fullest, best potential. So, for me, like you said, it was like the physical pain, dealt with that. The mental discipline of dealing with that, like no problem. But the emotional devastation of that, like having this power ripped away, like that's what eventually broke me. And I think that's where I needed to grow. And through meditation, I had a coach one day, because normally I just sit there, he talks, I listen, and just, move the mind. And one day he's like, tell me a story. And I was shocked because it kind of put me on the spot. So I just started telling a story. And I just made up some story about like a wolf cub or whatever, but the wolf had a bum leg. And it was just a metaphor for my story, like very obviously. But something in me just like opened, like something deep. And I was like, oh my God, I like started writing. So as part of this process, he started like he'd give me like a prompt, something philosophical and deep, and I'd like write a story about it and another story. And I just kept coming and coming like this creativity that I think I had forgotten I had. Probably as a kid, I
Mhm.
enjoyed writing and stories and all this, but I had forgotten about it and it was buried so deep. So all this stuff, like from the darkest, deepest depths of my soul started like coming up in the form of like writing stories. And for me, this creativity was healing. And I think that's true. I mean, for me, it was writing. For other people, it might be like painting or dancing or singing or whatever. But that's what eventually healed me. That's what allowed the energy or the emotions to move again, to, for me to start to really to love myself again. Do you know?
Oh,
Um,
yes, yes. You're speaking my language here, really. That whole, hitting that rough spot and getting through the physical part, and then like finding something that would spark that creativity. That works for a lot of people. And just the thought of journaling, answering prompts, it's that inner work. It's that inner work that we don't go to as our go-to that actually gets us to that place where we're answering philosophical questions. We're pondering what our purpose and our role is in our life. We're thinking, how can I be more joyful? All of those things are coming out. And it's just a matter of going through that exploration to find that thing, and it doesn't always just come to the surface. It takes the inner work and going deep and doing maybe several iterations until you find out what that thing or things is. And so I'm really glad that you're sharing this with us today, because I think a lot of the listeners can relate to that whole idea of adversity for sure. Getting stuck and not being able to get out of it, getting that mental game going. But I don't know that everyone knows how to find that thing.
hmm.
Because I think that people spend a lot of time trying to search to find that thing, when really when they sit with themselves, literally sit with yourself and get, because not everyone's a writer. And so I say, but however you got to get your thoughts out of your head to find those creative answers. Voice notes can work too. You start talking about a prompt, And then you're like, oh my gosh. And what you said was very interesting about how you were sitting as the student of the coach and taking on a lot of information, but it wasn't until that provocative exploratory question that really did it. And so we can all be that person for ourselves that asks us those deep questions. So it's more about the art of learning how to ask deep, open-ended questions of ourselves, and then creating the space where we can be without distractions and just doing it. And because it doesn't take that long, and we think that, oh, we got to sit down and fill a tablet, sit for an hour and grind out something. And a lot of times you can do that for as little as 2 minutes, and whoa, that comes out, and then you can activate it.
Oh yeah, like just grounding yourself. Some people say like standing with your bare feet in the grass, even touching a tree, like all this stuff. It sounds so woo-woo, especially for me. Remember, I come from a family of like doctors and engineers where this
Yes.
stuff was like at best laughed at or dismissed, right? So this is kind of like my identity is just going for a little bit of a journey here. Um, and I think uh, what is cool though, when I reflect back on this story, right? We started the kid in front of the TV watching Star Trek or playing with the toys, the spaceships, right? This is a clue. Like if you're feeling lost, what did you do when you were a kid when you had choice?
Yes.
You could do anything. What were you doing? And if you can't remember, like ask your parents or whatever, like your siblings, your friends, what did you do? Were you outside, like running around? Were you playing in the flowers? Were you pretending you were exploring other galaxies? Like, what did you do when you were a kid? Because that is the clue to like what would be the most meaningful things in your life. And for me, is this exploration, this idea of wonder. As soon as I was like opened that door, it was like shining a flashlight in a cave. And now I'm exploring like my own mind and I'm just fascinated. Wow, more, more. This is amazing. I'm exploring this whole new realm I didn't even realize was there. And it's the same thing as a kid watching Star Trek. Now I'm just looking in a different world. So, that was really uh, magical for me is really the only word that comes to mind, right? When I reflect, it was years of reflecting on this when I was like, wait a sec, that's like exactly what I did as a kid. And, like I knew what to do the whole time. I had just forgotten.
Yes. You gave yourself permission to do unorthodox or maybe unmainst or non-mainstream things that weren't part of that theoretical background of your parents, and that's what you did. So you gave your own self permission to go explore without thinking about how other people might play into that, because at the end of the day, it's you that lives the life. That's you that can get creative, and that's you that gets unstuck. And you don't need to ask anybody to go out there and be that fun, creative self that you were when you were a kid. That's it.
Yeah. And, I thought that strength and power was controlling my fate, right? In
Mm-hmm.
business, in, sports, in whatever. It was like, well, I'll just work harder. I'll outsmart everybody and I will control the pieces. And that's what makes me powerful. And that really came because I was good at these things, right? I was good at planning and I was good at what I did, you know, but I think that created a kind of a false sense of self, right? I was actually deceiving myself through that. And then when all this happened, I think what I started to accept was that like strength is not about, like rigidity and like what we sometimes think of as like masculinity is like the unshakable man, right? The man that is never afraid or never needs help, right? To this idea of like true power came from surrender, not to my circumstance,
Mm-hmm.
but
To
really to
yourself.
myself, to
Yes,
looking
to
in the
yourself.
mirror. And just surrendering, just like, just put down, quit fighting myself, right? That persona that I created to protect me while I was injured was needed, 100%. I needed that version of myself to like get me back on my feet. But at some point, I was like, hey, it's like looking in the mirror and be like, hey, buddy, I got this. You can sit down. Thank you for this, right? Like actually thanking yourself with gratitude, and then like the cathartic rush of you would feel is just surrendering to yourself. And now like, oh, hey, I don't feel this obligation or this weight of expectation right now in this moment. I feel like I just want to sit down and write a story, you know, uh, as simple and as, beautiful as that sounds, that was kind of my thing. And then that then translated to kind of what we talked about at the beginning. Now, all of a sudden, more empathetic. My ability to show up no matter what's going on with that like confident, positive energy that now my team picks up on like immediately. I don't have to say anything. I just walk in the room and they're like, okay, it's gonna be okay. Because now I'm just putting off that energy and bad things happen and cash flow is terrible and we lose the project and right like no problem. I'm just taking it in. It's still work. Definitely, there are definitely days when I don't do a good job of it, but I'm trying, I'm trying to work with this. And the evolution of this for me, with the writing, I started writing meditations. And because I like science fiction and fantasy, I started writing like metaphors of the journey I just told you about and all the philosophical questions I was thinking about. I wrote a story. Like, what if you were on an alien planet and it was like made of ice and there was a storm chasing you, and that was really a metaphor for facing some kind of your demons or something like that, right? So I started writing these meditations and I started putting them on YouTube and sharing them with people. And um, yeah, the response has been really interesting, especially from men. This idea of we talked about this kind of like masculine persona, I think, that or expectation to protect and provide and not be vulnerable and not be, that is, it doesn't have to be true. That story doesn't have to be true about any man.
It definitely doesn't have to be true. And the fact that you use your creativity to touch the 12-year-old boy and all of these men that go to your channel to take in your meditations, you put it in a way that they can take it in. And so as they're listening to these stories that they can relate to the things that are going on in their lives, you know, using metaphors and doing it in that way, it's so much easier to show up and to take it all in. I believe. And so you basically what you've done is you created a space that's inviting, non-threatening. They can come in, they can do it in a way to explore, and then they can kind of see some similarities, maybe parallels, in their lives and how these superheroes or space exploration stories of these environments, they can take some of the lessons that you've learned in your whole life, because there's a different way of putting it out there, because we've done it two ways today, really. You've told the nonfiction story of what happened in your life. And so you're saying that by going through all those things and also telling your story in that way has also been the catalyst to tell it in this creative way that you can impact all of these men to get into their 12-year-old selves, have a little fun doing it, and then come out in a way that where they can be vulnerable, they can be empathetic, they can go into self, and then they can not have to look for others for permission. They can give their own selves the permission. They can let down the shield, because that's what I'm thinking. Let down that shield, put the sword aside, and be in that space where everything's just lighter and easier. And you're absolutely right. When you are in a place of business, organization, where family, your energy is felt the moment that you step into that room and slightly before. And so how you show up if you don't have your energy and your inner self in check, it's going to affect everything. And so I think that's where you really built your belief back up, was being able to go back to that time where things were great, uh, seeing in yourself that the strength that you did in your mental mindset, that's what got you through. So you're like, no matter what's going on, the mental mindset will get me through, and I can do it in a way that feels good to me.
Yeah, right. I think like we said at the beginning, right? Meditation, not as mainstream, although it's becoming a little bit more, but definitely more popular in my experience with female communities. They seem to more naturally want to connect in those ways, whereas men, for probably a whole complicated reason, like list of reasons, are a little bit like standoffish. I know I was, right, when I
Oh,
learned.
that's interesting that you said that, because at one of our men's room events, I actually took the men in the audience and we went through a guided meditation, and the feedback that I got was that they really liked that, and I'm like, oh, I'm
Hmm.
onto something here. They actually, I created this space, they came, they partake. So you don't always know what something's going to be because you have preconceived ideas about what meditation is, what it can do for you, and who it's for. And so it takes experience and exploration to find
Oh,
out.
definitely. And if you look at, you look at the Gen Xers or the baby boomers, they came from a time when it was like, just put your nose down and work.
Hmm.
Don't complain, right? Like weakness is not going to feed you, right? So we're coming out from a time of that, and now, the millennials, some of the younger generation, we are fortunate to have the space to be able to journey a little bit inward and unpack some of this stuff. And maybe there's some generational trauma that comes with that, right? Maybe you learned from your parents their pain transferred. It's not that they deliberately did it, it's just that you kind of watch them, how they behave, and you start to mimic it and you start to believe what they believe. That's just the normal, that's how humans work,
It is
right?
until you interrupt the cycle with something else.
Yeah, yeah. So, 100%, like I said, or like you said, people are at this event. Hey, try this meditation. Like, wow, ooh, what was that? It's powerful, right? So, this was the idea. What if I could just create a story, keep it short, less than 10 minutes, and you just listen to the story. Don't worry about it. And it'll actually trick you because when you listen to a story, what does your mind do? It focuses on the story. It might wander a little bit, but come back to it. And guess what happens? That's meditation. That's just focusing on something. You're just listening to a story. Same thing with a podcast. It's kind of like meditating, right? You're just listening and you know, I have this idea that people that we look to in our life as so successful, like, oh wow, they've got it all, they've done it all. Um, but it's lonely at the top.
It is.
And I think, in my travels, one truth that I've learned is that it's not what you're willing to do, because everybody's willing to do things to get it. It's what you're willing to give up. That's the difference. So if you have some goal in mind, what am I willing to do to get that? Well, I'm willing to, I'm going to get up every morning and go for a run or whatever. I want to lose the weight. The question is really, what are you willing to give up? Are you willing to get up an hour earlier? And that means you're going to go to bed an hour earlier and get your head right? Like, that's the real question. So if you think about these people that are so successful that you look up to, that they've got it all together, blah, blah, what did they have to give up to get there? Right?
Yes, that is the
Why?
ultimate question, because what you give up builds the capacity for the new to come in.
Dinner, right? So I think people that on the surface might look really successful,
Hmm.
I think they're underserved in terms of things like this, mental health, meditation, whatever, because they need it probably more than anybody, because the pressure they're under at the top is like so huge, and what they had to give up to get there. Like maybe it was time with their spouse, with their kids. Maybe there's a divorce in there somewhere, right? Like their
Hmm.
parents or whatever, like something was sacrificed to get there that has caused pain, for sure. Um, that's just life, you know? So yeah, I think that's why podcasts like you're doing, I think it's important to tell these stories, right? That people tell some real authentic stuff, right? People put the stuff they put on social media is a bit of a mask, right? Hey, here's me happy with my family. What you don't see is that 10 minutes later we had a big fight and we didn't talk for the rest of the day, right? Like, you know.
You're absolutely right. People look at all of these positive stories that people put out there, not really thinking about, like you said, the real things that happen. And and that kind of brings me to the thought of looking externally doesn't get us to where we need to go. It really starts with us internally. And I really appreciate you highlighting the what will I give up to build capacity, because a lot of times people are doing it like they're adding and piling more things on without taking something off to get there, and it's not, and that gets you back to the old way of thinking. Whereas if I just try harder, if I just get a little bit more thick of a skin, if I invest more in something else, all of these things. And really it's about the creating the capacity through giving up certain things so you can really have what's important at the end of the day. um and so what I like to encourage people to really ask themselves is, what is it about that one thing that you're willing to give something up for? So I'm adding on to what you said. What is important about that one thing that you're willing to give something up? And so if you do those two things together, you're going to get closer to that purposeful, joyous living, and being able to really, step into that belief, like you said, that all things are possible. Just put yourself in the mind of a child and go back to that place and recreate those experiences.
And I think this idea of giving something up, like it doesn't have to be something tangible. It could be like a false belief, or it could be to your
Yes.
ego, right? It could be like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'm biking. Maybe I love cycling and I've cycled my whole life and I've put on some weight and I'm trying to lose the weight. So I'm just gonna cycle more. I'm gonna cycle more than I used to. I'm gonna go faster. I'm gonna go more. But now I'm gonna get injured and I just can't lose the weight. I'm just really frustrating, whatever. When if you kind of let go of that piece of your identity for a second that says I ride bicycles and just
Yes.
stop and be like, maybe I also just need to eat better, or maybe I need to just cycle 3 days a week and add in some swing. Like your body just wants something different. So if you stop for a sec, and if you're willing to let go of those notions, you might see some crazy results, even by working less. I'm actually going to bike less, but I'm going to eat different, or I'm going to educate myself on nutrition, and then I'm not going to be injured. And like, right? Like the path is not necessarily what you want to hear, right? We're comfortable in where we are. We love the trenches that we dig, right? We just run harder and the hole gets deeper. And that's really tough,
It
right?
is.
And I think sometimes when we're trying to do things or accomplish a goal or change our life or whatever, it can feel heavy, like pressure, like more discipline. Oh, and then we're hard on ourselves, like, oh man, I tried and I did it for 2 days and I stopped. Like it's more pressure. But I did my 30-day challenge or whatever. And this idea of like discipline takes energy and you're really hard on yourself, or at least I'm very hard on myself. But I think you can reframe it, right? Because if we're trying to accomplish something, it's because we want our future version of ourselves to be something different than it is today,
Hmm.
physically, mentally, emotionally, monetary wise, right? Relationship, right? Health, wealth, and relationships. Everything's like those three things, right?
Hmm.
So then that's why it's tough because right now in this moment, what do I want to do? I want instant gratification. I want Netflix and a bag of chips. That's what I want. But to get the future version of me is better. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go exercise, whatever. So if you can reframe it and be like, if this is for future me, do I love future me enough to do this right now? In other
Yes.
words, do I love myself enough to do it? And I think this is why we talk about courage to do the things and whatever, but really the most courageous thing at the end of the day is to love yourself enough. And if you do that, then you'll do the things.
Yes.
That's
All things will follow when you love yourself enough to take care of that self. And
right.
and that involves getting in the present moment, where you are today, how you are, loving that person there, and then growing that individual to that place that you would like to be.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it might be a painful journey. It definitely
It
was for
most
me and
likely
still is
is.
for me,
It
right?
most
It might
likely
be a,
is. We can't get there without a little bit of pain because if something isn't bad enough, that sometimes we need that rock bottom or that bad place to actually nudge us, shove us into doing something different and changing. Because if things are good, you just keep on going. And you maybe not evolve a whole lot, but you have some adversities happen or other things that you're like, oh, I really don't like it when I do this thing, or I really don't like being in this situation. Well, that's the catalyst for changes. It's affected me enough that I don't want it anymore. I'm giving myself permission because I love myself to work on myself and do this thing. And I'm not looking for anyone's acknowledgement but my own.
mhm, right? Some acknowledgement is nice, but I think this is why, peer groups, mastermind
Yes.
groups, churches, like whatever community you need to build around you, because this is not easy stuff, right? It's not easy, let's say your marriage is struggling. It's really difficult to sit down there and have some really honest, and it's not going to be one conversation, it'll be lots of them. And they're not easy to sit there and listen to some of the pain you've caused or right. So having, friends you can talk to, groups. And I know from my experience, like my best friends in the world that I know since we were like 5 years old, we rarely have real conversations. When we see each other, it's very superficial, right? It's all laughing and joking and kind of like back into that comfort zone, but like rarely do we sit down and be like, dude, like, are you okay? And I recognize for me that that's a problem. I should talk to my friends about real stuff, I should feel comfortable doing that. But sometimes we're more comfortable talking about that stuff with people we don't know as well. So this is why sometimes a community of people that aren't that close and intimate, like you can maybe work your way there, are really beneficial, right? People, Alcoholics Anonymous is a great example, right? Groups like that have common goals where you can talk about this stuff in a very safe place. Um, Seeking out your tribe or whatever is a very, very powerful way to do that. You don't have to do it on your own. And I think that for me was a false belief, right? This idea that I'm a man, I'm strong, I'm physically big. I should be able to just like work through this. Couldn't be more wrong, right? So.
So, what I'm hearing is that finding your tribe and community where you can get that support is probably one of the best things that you could do to gift yourself to go on that journey so you're not doing it alone. What else would you add to our listeners today that they could take away and go see where they can take it?
So I guess I'd finish with one last thought. I ran this event and it was all men. And one of the questions we asked, like, what does it mean to be masculine? And immediately to a man, everybody said, well, to provide and to protect. And that's what we need, that's what, it means to be masculine. But then one guy said, well, shouldn't any good person do that? And everyone's like, huh, yeah, right? Think about a single mother. What do you think she does? Right?
Yes.
So they're like, huh. And then so we pose this question like, okay, well, picture stereotypical roles. A man's working in a garage in the car, a woman's inside with the kids, and she's, cleaning up and making dinner. Seems pretty normal, like cliche a bit. Like, now switch the roles. The woman is in the car, in the garage working on the car. The man is inside doing the laundry, kind of doing the kids or whatever, but he's owning the shit out of that role because he knows it's important. It's what his family needs. Now, does that feel masculine? And everyone's like, holy shit, yeah, it does.
Totally does.
Okay, right? So,
Yeah.
like, what is the difference? We have this, I think, conflated what's a role and what does it really mean to be masculine? And, one thing that was really funny was, we thought about this, we thought about this. And then we talked about play. We're like, what do you say when you see a bunch of boys on the backyard rolling around in the grass and wrestling, whatever, right? You probably laugh and say, oh, boys will be boys, right? We love it when little boys will do that, right? And nowadays, you're not supposed to encourage one way or the other or whatever, but like you see a bunch of girls and they're like pretty dresses doing that, you're gonna, oh my God, what are you doing? Right? Again, I'm being maybe not as woke as I should be here, but the point is, as an adult, when we grow as men, when do you play?
That
Right?
is, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And I ask this question to people, and people are just like stumped. It'll stop them in their tracks. And we're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, when you were a kid, you were a boy, you were outside moving, climbing trees, like doing all the things. Um, when did that stop? How do you play right now as an adult? So like, what does it mean to be masculine? Play is in there somewhere. I'm convinced of it. I guarantee it. And too many people as an adult are like, oh my God, I need to like, I don't have a hobby. I haven't had a hobby in years, right? Like I just work, And I'm like, what would happen if you played a little bit in your life? Maybe with your kids or whatever, right? So I think maybe that's the last thing I'll kind of leave you with is, when you think about what it means to be a man, to be masculine, maybe again back to like think about what you did as a boy. There's maybe a clue there.
I think you've really hit that on the head there. So it's really um play is powerful, to being that person with purpose and being able to step away from some of the traditional ways of looking at what you could or should be doing and just go play and have fun. Um, and if you do that, a lot of great things follow because we don't always want to be caught up in our performance roles. Well, when you're playing, you're not having to perform. So there you go. That's why it's probably enjoyable. You don't care. I mean,
Right?
you just have curiosity and you're enjoying and you're getting the dopamine up from laughing and whatever else that you're doing, the camaraderie. Yeah, play is powerful. And so it
The,
feeds
the
into masculine of wanting to to have
yeah,
some power and purpose and but it's in a different way than the traditional providing and protection.
the 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 most powerful litmus test for me, I realized, was my dog. So I've got a lab. He's like very high energy. So you can imagine when I come home, he's just the happiest dog in the world. So I know that I am like present and, you know, in a good space when I come home and I'm like, oh, who's a good boy? And we kind of play and I wrestle him a little bit and, his tail's wagging and, I give him some real quality time for just a few seconds. And then maybe I take him for a walk or maybe later, whatever. But like, versus I come home and I'm like, hey, buddy. And I walk in and I barely acknowledge him because I'm like, oh my God, I got like, right? So I started to notice when do I do the first way and when to do the second way. And it's been a really interesting way to observe my own emotional and mental health through how I'm treating my dog, right? They say, Lord, help me be the person my dog thinks I am, right? So there's probably these types of clues all over your life to look for those kinds of things and maybe just observe where you're at, you know?
Absolutely. And what I would like to do, Adam, because I've had such a rich conversation with you and on so many themes, is I would like you to share how we can find you in your community, because I think that's really important because that's why the two of us are here today, is because we both powerfully believe in community and not doing things alone and providing awareness impact, and a place for people to go. So I would like to be able to have you share that with us before we close out for
Sure.
today.
Easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. There's not a lot of Kolozettis out there. My meditations, if my stories, if you're interested, you can find them on YouTube. It's called Veritas Realm. We'll put the link in. You can also find them on Insight Timer. It's a meditation app, and you can find them on Spotify. So they're, accessible. YouTube has like the videos attached to it. The audio is you can get it all over the place. So yeah, you can find me quite easily, I think, if you Google my name. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.